Good afternoon. I thank you all for coming out. It's kind of a historic day for us. Really, we've moved forward on the GMO bill. I think we're going to continue. We've got plenty of support. It's bipartisan support. I'm delighted to see Republican and Democrat representatives and senators with us, all of whom believe, as we do, that people have a right to know what they're putting in their bodies. With that, probably the most notable speaker nationally, Jeffrey Smith, is with us today. Jeffrey is the author of the world's best-selling and #1 rated book on health dangers, genetically modified organisms. His meticulous research documents how biotech companies continue to mislead legislators and safety officials to put the health of society at risk. His first book, Seeds of Deception, Exposing Industry and Government Lies About the Safety of Genetically Engineered Foods You're Eating, masterfully combines the art of storytelling and investigative reporting. His second book, Genetic Roulette, The Documented Health Risks of Genetically Engineered Foods, is the authoritative work on GMO health dangers. Mr. Smith has been described as a life changer. Mr. Smith has lectured in over 30 countries worldwide. Former U.S. National Institute of Health scientist Candace Pert describes Jeffrey as the leading world expert in the understanding and communication of the health issues surrounding genetically modified foods. With that, Jeffrey Smith.
Thank you. Thank you, Representative Roy, and the other representatives and senators who are forwarding this opportunity for Connecticut citizens to enjoy what the citizens of more than 50 countries enjoy today, what 9 out of 10 Americans have sought for more than a decade. Very simply, the right to know if they are eating genetically engineered foods, and the right to choose whether they choose to be part of this experiment of eating GMOs or non-GMOs. In its basic format, this bill is very simple. Do we give people the information that they can use to decide what they're going to put in their mouths and in the mouths of their children? That's it. You can be against GMOs. You can be in favor of GMOs. You can be mixed and still desire that people are given a choice to make their own decisions. In America, that is one thing that we should be standing for. And it is interesting that 9 out of 10 Americans want GMOs labeled. How often, Representative Roy, do you end up with a bill that's favored by 90% of the public? It is not very often. So what's the controversy? If people want to know what's in their food, let them know. It's required in Europe. It's required in Russia, China, Australia, New Zealand, Japan, but not in the United States. So the basic issue is right to know. But there's some sub-issues. And speaking to the press, this GMO issue is not really a single-story issue. When you look more deeply, you realize there's some very powerful information and stories that have not been shared with the public, and the public needs to know. Let's describe one. I was on a radio show at NPR yesterday in Connecticut, and after I spoke, a representative of the Farm Bureau said we should trust the United States government and let them decide for us whether labels are important. So this is the major criticism of this bill, that it is not the responsibility of the Connecticut legislators to make this determination. Someone else is taking care of us, and we're sure they're doing a good job. This is the main argument. The federal organization that should be responsible for acquiring labeling is the Food and Drug Administration. And they are mandated officially to promote biotechnology. That started in the early 90s. They got that word from the first Bush administration, and so they created a new position for Monsanto's former attorney, Michael Taylor, to be in charge of policy at the FDA. And the policy, when it came out, claimed that the agency was not aware of any information showing the foods created from these new methods, GMOs, differ from other foods in any meaningful or uniform way. Based on that quote, the policy says, companies like Monsanto, who told us that PCBs, Agent Orange, and DDT were safe, can determine on their own whether their GMOs are safe, without even telling the FDA or consumers. Michael Taylor then became Monsanto's vice president and lobbyist. He's now the U.S. food safety czar. Now, if GMO foods were completely the same, we still may want labeling. Vegetarians may want to know if there's meat genes. Humans may want to know if there's human genes. Animals may want to know if there's animal genes. But it turns out that the sentence upon which the policy was written was not true. A friend of mine organized a lawsuit against the FDA, which forced 44,000 secret internal memos into the public domain. And it turns out that not only were the scientists at the FDA aware that GMOs were significantly different, they warned over and over and over again. And you can read the actual memos on our website at responsibletechnology.org. They warned that these foods might create allergens, toxins, new diseases, and nutritional problems, and urged their superiors to require long-term study. But I remind you, the policy claimed we're not aware of any information showing that the foods are different. The memos show specific complaints about that sentence, pleading with the superiors not to use that as an excuse to abdicate regulation. So, those who would be against this bill tell us that we should rely on the FDA. If you look at the FDA policy, it says we should rely on Monsanto and the other 4 biotech companies to determine if their foods are safe. Last Saturday, an article appeared in the Wall Street Journal in which Monsanto had its latest settlement announced, $93 million, for the people living in Nitro, West Virginia. They were going to use that money for their health and the cleanup of up to 4,500 homes. This is just the latest in a series of settlements and convictions of the company that's in charge of determining the safety of our food. They had to spend $700 million in Anniston, Alabama, after poisoning the population there, and documents revealed, and these are public documents also available on websites, that they were aware of the damage, and a memo in response by a Monsanto representative said, we can't afford to lose $1 of business. And that was their attitude. I've spoken to former Monsanto employees. One told me 3 of his colleagues did studies on their own milk from cows treated with Monsanto's bovine growth hormone, and the 3 Monsanto scientists refused to drink milk thereafter unless it was organic and therefore not treated because of the high levels of the cancer-promoting IGF-1 found in the milk. We have in my book, Genetic Roulette, which will be available to press, documented how the biotech industry, and this is not just Monsanto, but the biotech industry, has used superficial science that does not look at the full range of things that can go wrong, how they use tobacco science, in other words, rig research to avoid finding problems, and they've been caught red-handed, and it's been described in peer-reviewed published studies, to dumb down the research to hide the evidence of harm. In fact, former Monsanto scientists have told me that this is what their policy is. If they find problems with certain GM foods, they change the writing of the research to hide the evidence. Now, this is not a bill against Monsanto. I'm just following the trail of responsibility, who we are handing the responsibility to determine if our foods are safe. If individual independent scientists want to do research, they don't have permission to use the patented seeds. 26 scientists wrote a letter to the EPA complaining that there's virtually no independent studies being done because they're denied access to the seeds. And I document over and over again how scientists who discover problems are often fired, stripped of responsibilities, gagged, forced out, etc. And this is all documented and very well understood. It's not a controversy. In fact, it's written up in Nature, a prominent science journal, about this reaction to scientists who discover adverse findings. And so this is just one of the threads. We should rely on someone else to protect us, and I'm sure they're doing a good job. But if you follow that thread, it turns out the fox is guarding the henhouse. Now, is it true that GMOs are unsafe? Well, first of all, I want to remind you that this bill does not require us to make the determination that GMOs are safe or unsafe. Certainly there are people on both sides of that equation. All it does is say we can give mothers the chance to make the determination of what they feed their infant. And that's what's critical. Yes, many, many doctors and scientists believe GMOs are unsafe. The American Academy of Environmental Medicine says every doctor in America should prescribe non-GMO diets to their patients. It's hard to do if it's not labeled. So they called upon labeling. In fact, they called upon the government to institute a moratorium on GMOs, saying that the animal feeding studies show evidence of reproductive problems, accelerated aging, organ damage, gastrointestinal problems, and other serious disorders. Now, a study came out last week, and it's a little technical, but it's just the latest in a series of research studies that show why I don't want to simply trust the biotech industry's assumptions and research. There are two types of genetically engineered crops, primarily. Those that resist death from herbicide, they're called herbicide tolerant, so Roundup Ready soybeans can be sprayed with Roundup herbicide. And there's more herbicides that end up in the food portion, and Roundup is not safe. It's linked to birth defects, cancer, etc. The other version is the crops like corn and cotton that produce their own pesticide. It breaks open the stomach of insects and kills them. Now, the reason why the Environmental Protection Agency, which registers the corn and cotton as pesticides, the reason why they allow Bt toxin, which breaks open the stomach of insects to kill them, in our food supply, is that they insist that the Bt toxin does not have any impact on human cells and certainly wouldn't break open holes in their cells. Last week, in the Journal of Applied Toxicology, it was found that Bt toxin breaks open the holes of the membranes of human cells, suggesting that by eating Bt toxin, we may cause disruption in the digestive tract of humans. Another assumption by the EPA, which was their excuse for allowing Bt toxin in corn, they said the toxin is destroyed in the digestive process of humans. A study last year in Canada found in 93% of pregnant women the Bt toxin in their blood, and in 80% of the unborn fetuses. So it wasn't destroyed during digestion. These are two fundamental assumptions that were used as the basis for safety claims, which have been shown to be untrue. In fact, there's almost no human feeding studies ever published. There's one. And that one feeding study shows that part of the gene inserted into Monsanto's soybeans to make it Roundup Ready transferred into the DNA of bacteria living inside our intestines and may have continued to function because it was Roundup Ready gut bacteria. This means long after we stop eating GMOs, we may still have these foreign proteins produced continuously inside of our guts. When I speak to doctors' conferences, and I do all over the world, and I mention some of these findings, they say to me, this might explain the rise in gastrointestinal problems. This might explain the rise in reproductive problems because of the Roundup linked to reproductive failure. I could spend the next hour going into the details of the scientific evidence as reported by peer-reviewed journals, and to another hour talking about the evidence from veterinarians treating livestock, and another hour talking about the doctors who do prescribe non-GMO diets to patients and find that they get better. But I've done this enough. It's on our website. It's very well documented, and it's sufficient to get an average American in the mood to avoid GMOs. So if someone is in the mood to avoid GMOs and they go shopping, the best we have now is a non-GMO shopping guide. And I have one for every member of the press in the back, but that shouldn't be our job. In fact, our Institute for Responsible Technology, as far as I know, is the only organization that's actually looking to monitor the health of Americans that have eaten GMOs. We started that passively since we started because people were sending us emails. We started doing it formally last month. Why is it that our small nonprofit is the only one? The FDA in Canada, called Health Canada, said, we will monitor the health of Canadians to see if GMOs are causing problems. A year later, they gave it up, saying it was too difficult. So no one is monitoring, no one else is properly testing, and we don't have a choice. Hopefully this stuff is not as dangerous as I think it is. Or maybe it's responsible for the increase in multiple chronic illnesses, reproductive problems, allergies, etc., that many people tell us is on the rise in their practices since GMOs were introduced. And they are frustrated that their patients cannot simply take the doctor's advice to avoid GMOs. So in summary, before I take questions, I want to remind you, we just went off on two big areas. We went off on, can we trust the FDA and Monsanto, and is this stuff really safe? I want to remind you that it does not matter whether you believe it is safe. It does not matter whether you believe that the FDA is looking out for us. This is just a bill to give people a choice that's enjoyed by the people of more than 50 countries and desired by 90% of Americans. Do we want to deny the choice for people to determine what they want to feed themselves and their children? I don't. And I hope the people of Connecticut and their representatives don't. In fact, this is a trend that's happening all over the country, and you're about to be bombarded with misinformation. No, it doesn't cost more money to label. No, it's not going to hurt farmers. No, it's not going to make it more difficult to feed the world. It's going to give people the choice. And I hope that Connecticut is the leader of the 19 states that are entertaining similar legislation. I hope Connecticut takes the leading role and establishes that precedent for Americans from now on. Thank you very much.
Wow, I hope I get that applause next time I want to thank Jeffrey. We'll take questions from the press right now, and then we'll go back to discussing the GMOs and what is out there and what different legislators. I want them to have a chance to let you know why they're on board and what they hope to accomplish. So, members of the press.
Any state passed a similar bill?
We got
No.
You didn't get very far last year. In fact, you got virtually nowhere with this last year. You say you have more support. Do you have any legislative leaders on board?
Yes. There's a whole bunch right here. There's minority leader of the Senate. Maybe next year. I don't know. And several committee chairs, and also, yes, we do have leadership. We have bipartisan, as you guys know, Democrat, Republican, 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 and Democrat, 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 Republican.
For this?
Not officially yet, but they know what's coming, and they're interested in it, and they're giving us a modicum of support so far. I think we'll get it to the floor, and from that point on, we'll do our best.
Administration. No. What, the Malloy administration?
I'm sorry, Craig.
The Malloy administration?
Yes.
Guess what?
That you have their support?
No.
I haven't talked to them at all. We've had some difficulties with the governor because of my budget vote last year. And in fact, I will be seeing him at 1:30 today. on another issue, and I will bring it up at that point, and I'll get back to you, Greg.
For Mr. Smith, what's the difference between a genetically modified organism and, say, a hybrid organism, such as a hybrid tomato or something built to be more resistant to disease?
Very good question. The difference between a GMO and a hybrid. Well, GMOs are a lot of things, but they're not sex. Sexual reproduction is the normal process for producing hybrids. You take wide crosses, a corn plant with this trait, another corn plant with this trait, and you cross them, and that's the way it's been done for centuries. With genetic engineering, they take, for example, a gene from the soil bacteria, Bt, which produces this toxin, make millions of copies, put it into a gene gun, shoot the gun into a plate of millions of cells, clone the cells into a plant. It causes massive collateral damage with hundreds or thousands of mutations, possibly hundreds or thousands of changes in the gene expression of the natural corn, but you end up with that gene inside every single cell of the plant. And you can mix and match across different species. They've taken spider genes and put them into goats in the hope that they can milk the goat to get spiderweb protein to make bulletproof vests. I'm not making this up. And so they have a toolbox now to mix and match across species as never before.
Any other questions?
Dick, it took you, I think, 7 years to get the cell phone bill through. And you're leaving after this year, right? Realistically, with the opposition that's coming from the food industry, from Monsanto, you're going to be able to do it this year, or are we looking at another long, drawn-out campaign?
I would expect another long term. I mean, the cell phone we introduced 15 years ago. We got it passed about 10 years ago. And the federal government is now looking at doing something because they found out it's a dangerous activity. So we got to bring along the government, but we have to win advocates one by one, and we will continue to do that. I expect that yes, I'm retiring from the legislature at the end of this year, but I certainly hope to continue working in the area of toxic chemicals and all. I think there's a lot more that we don't know about what's out there, what's mixing up. There's so many more illnesses with kids. We can't have a peanut butter sandwich in school. Wonder Bread, which used to build bodies strong 12 ways, now you got to watch out for gluten. There's something radically wrong in our environment, and I'm hoping to continue pursuing some solutions. Are you with the press, sir?
I'd like to know what GMO foods Americans are buying off shelves.
There are 9 genetically modified food crops: soy, corn, cotton, canola, sugar beets, Hawaiian papaya, a little zucchini, crookneck squash, and alfalfa. This list is on our shopping guide, which is available to press. We may have some extra left over. And it's also available at nongmoshoppingguide.com and at our iPhone application, Shop No GMO. And that also lists thousands of products which have been verified as non-GMO.
Thank you. Thank you very much to the press. I know that you've got deadlines. You're certainly welcome to stay and listen to continued discussion now. And Jeffrey, if you want to add to what we've done, and then we can open it to questions to the general public.
All right, thank you. Is there any, do we want to have the representative of the chance to say this?
Oh, yes. Excuse me. I'll just bring you up here one by one. Introduce yourself and say why you're interested in it.
Good morning. My name is Larry Butler, State Representative from the 72nd District, Chairman of the Housing Committee, Co-Chair of the House Committee, and I'm here to support Representative Roy because this is something that I have a great concern with. Ever since they actually cloned that first sheep dolly, I just knew someday there would be a press conference just like this to talk about, making us aware of, how this is coming into our food chain. So the press was talking about who's on board, who's not on board, but I want to let you know that I'm going to be fighting with you to get everybody on board.
Thank you, Chairman Roy. My name is Tony Huang. I'm a state representative representing Fairfield and Trumbull. For me, with all due respect, it's simply a right to know. And for me, I'd be the first to admit that my dietary habits probably isn't the most, guideline basis. But what mattered to me was the fact that if I wanted to know as a parent, if I wanted to know for myself, that I have an opportunity to decide. And the second thing I want to simply add is we wouldn't be here, we wouldn't be at this point without the community activists that we have, from coming up to testify, from sharing their inside knowledge, for Jeffrey to be able to travel throughout the entire world, sharing the message. The bottom line is we have a right to know. And it's a small step to ensuring that we can take care of ourselves and our bodies the way we want to. So thank you for having me.
Good morning or afternoon. I'm TRR, I represent Trumbull, along with Tony Huang in the legislature. And a couple things. It's amazing to have Jeff here. I was talking with Senator McKinney, and when the question was asked of Representative Roy, where's the governor on this? And the answer was, well, we don't know. And Senator said, just give him 10 minutes with Jeff, and he'll be with us. So if you can get that 10 minutes, I'd grab it. People have the right to know what's in their food. This simple but essential right is a primary reason why I'm supporting this legislation. As been stated, there are many, many questions about the safety of genetically engineered foods, ones that are far from being answered by the studies that have been commissioned by the food industry and paid for by the food industry itself. I know consumers would be quite surprised, to say the least, if they were aware of just how much of the food they place on their family's table is genetically altered. Moreover, when people understand that these genetically modified organisms, the GMOs, may well cause any number of health complications, the spike in food allergies, resistance to antibiotics, just to name a few, as well as the threat from the high level of pesticides found in these GMO foods. The cause for their alarm would no doubt grow in spades. In spite of these health risks, as we know, GM foods are regulated in the same manner as non-modified foods by the FDA. That's absurd. This is an important point we ought not overlook. And until the FDA discharges their duty to properly vet GM foods, we on the state level should take action. Given who is running the FDA, we don't expect them to step in anytime soon, unfortunately. But as Jeff said, action taken by 40 or 50 other countries and legislation being considered by close to 20 other states at this time needs to be taken, and we hope to be one of many in the end. Now, mind you, and I have to say this because I'm a Republican, this ought to be accomplished in the least restrictive manner as possible, and I'm certainly not in favor of reckless overregulation by the state. But that being said, the state does have an absolute responsibility to ensure that when our residents put food on their table, they know what's in it. This bill helps achieve that result. Thank you, Dick. Thank you, Jeff.
Good afternoon. I'm Representative Philip Miller of the 36th District. Yesterday afternoon, I met with a group of about 4 dozen teachers, and we got around to speaking on this bill. And we were, of course, acknowledging some basic facts that genetically modified organisms are not natural. They are not found in nature in the combinations and concentrations that we see, and they are certainly not made by God. So when we heard last week in public hearing some of the representatives from the industry, it was clear that they felt put out when we're just asking them to cop to what they are creating and adding to our food, just to cop to it, to acknowledge and admit what they're doing. You'd think in a perfect world, especially if they were going to toot the fact that they think it may help with fighting hunger, that they would brag about these things, and yet they don't because they're afraid to admit it. And they suggested to us that the consumer right to know was not equal to our efforts to force them to label. And I would have to agree with them, because I think the consumer right to know is way up here above any of our efforts to try to uphold that. And as far as whether the governor will support us or not, I believe that you see a pretty good cross-section of legislators here who have a consensus to speak to our peers and to hopefully pass this with such a strong consensus in both the House and Senate that it will be such a strong message for the governor that it can't be ignored. And I'd like to think that this administration, as they've been doing, has held the right of the consumer to know. So hopefully that's where we're heading. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Diana Urban, and I am the chair of the Select Committee on Children, but also in my other life I'm an economist. So I'm going to come at this from a little bit different perspective. When markets work the best, when consumers have what is called perfect information. We can't always have perfect information, but the better the information we have, the more allocatively and productively efficient the market is. Let me put that in different terms for you. When you go out to the store and you buy things, you are using your dollar votes. It's called consumer sovereignty. And those dollar votes, through the invisible hand of the market, for any of you who remember your economics, Adam Smith, those dollar votes messages go back to industry, to our farmers, to any person that's doing commodities, and then they will produce more of what you are voting for. Now, I used to tell my students, why do you think we don't make spinach-flavored toothpaste? And they would all laugh, right? They go, well, is it? Well, because nobody's going to buy it. Dollar votes are not going to be there. The consumer is sovereign if they have the information. So this bill is giving the consumer the information to make a choice, and that will allow the market to be more allocatively and productively efficient. Those dollar votes will go out there, and then we will really see what the consumer wants, whether they want genetically modified organisms. And the statistics out there tell us consumers want information, and they do not want what is called in Europe frankenfoods on their table for themselves, for their children, for their grandchildren. So I am a huge supporter of this bill, and I'm hoping we're going to be able to really push it forward. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Fred Camillo. I represent the 151st District, a third of Greenwich. I had the pleasure last night of listening to Jeffrey Smith with the Fairfield Group on his presentation, and I'm lucky my brother Gary has been involved with it and has been really educating me along through this process. And can't add much to what you've already heard today. I did speak at the Environment Committee meeting, hearing last week, and I had to leave early because I had another committee that was going on at the same time. But I understand that one of the opponents of this bill, someone led him to admit that he actually read labels for his kids. And that's all we're asking here, is to be able to read a label to know what you're eating. It's not about big government and mandates. It's about health. After all, if we don't have our health, what good is a fiscal note and a bank account? You need your health, and we just want that simple choice to know what we're eating. And I think this is a great first step. I think everybody here on both sides of the aisle is committed to fighting for this and to seeing it come to fruition. And thank you all for your interest in it, and certainly you're a big part of the equation. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is John McKinney, State Senator from Fairfield, and Bill Miller is now my favorite member of the legislature because he's the only one who didn't abandon me, as all of you guys walked over this way. So, and we don't even know each other that well, but we've now become fast friends. You know, I did say to TR that when Dick was, and I'm a former member of the Environment Committee and enjoyed all my time with Dick. Don't necessarily miss the committee so much, but I do miss my time with you. When he was asked about the governor's position and others, I joked, well, why don't we just give everybody 10 minutes with Jeff? Because it was 10 minutes last night that really changed my perspective on the foods we eat. And the simple fact that, you know, Kraft and other companies make foods for sale in Europe that don't have GMOs, but they make food for sale in this country that does. And I think you have to ask the question why. We've seen a number of these issues over the years in the Environment Committee, whether it was mercury in light bulbs and other labeling issues. There are ways to deal with the realities of the market and the manufacturing of products that can be consistent with public information that we're trying to do here, and I certainly will work with Dick and defer to his leadership on those different ways of drafting legislation. But we are also doing something good just by proposing the bill and by talking about it, and that is educating people throughout the state of Connecticut and educating legislators. I'm one who over the years did not know a lot about the issue, learned a little bit last year and more this year. And I think as we continue to educate legislators and the public, we'll see, as Representative Urban said, market forces do a lot of the work for us. We're already obviously have seen the growth of certified organic food sales. We're now seeing companies actually label their products as non-GMO food products because that's a positive marketing aspect for those companies. So the market can and does work well, and we can help that by educating the public. So I'm happy to be here. I'm going to go back and join Phil so he's not alone, and thank Dick for his leadership.
And just so you know a little bit about my background, I spent 25 years as a writer and editor at the old New Haven Journal-Courier, which is now defunct. But when I found that people were hiding stuff, it's because there's something they didn't want us to know. There was a problem out there that they hadn't been able to figure out, but they still wanted to make their bucks. Today, we're doing the same thing. We're going after that information. We want to know, you want to know, and I think the world out there knows. Europe has certainly taken a lead on it. Canada has fought the chemical companies in court. And Dow Chemical took them all the way to the Supreme Court because pesticides were banned up there, and said, you have to take our product, you have to spread that poison on our ground, on your ground. And the Supreme Court in Canada said, no, they can make the choice. You cannot force them to take your chemicals. So we don't want to go that far. I hope we don't go that far unless we take it into Canada, because then I have a little more confidence in how it'll turn out. But certainly appreciate the number of people who turned out for this event today. We're going to need your support all the way through this process, whether it's 1 year, 2 years, 5 years. We're going to hang tough, and if nothing else, we will get that education out there, and that will bring people to our side. Thank you, and I'm going to turn it back over to Jeff for questions and any additional comments he wishes to make.
Let's give another hand to these very bold, powerful leaders who are looking out for us and our children and future generations. Thank you all. Thank you all very much.